Hello and welcome back to the Mentors. This is Vadim.
And Sergey.
And most of our longtime listeners will know that lots of times on the show, we talk about what's going on in the world. And today, as we can probably hear in the background, helicopters flying overhead in Manhattan. It's impossible to ignore what's going on all across the United States of America. Now, we have a pretty big international audience here at the Mentors, and we thought we would tell you a little bit about how it's felt here in New York for the last few days. Yesterday, Sergey and I were kind of going about our evenings. We had spent the day out because it was a really nice day in New York, and we had seen some protests through Fifth Avenue, but everything seemed pretty cohesive. Everything seemed okay from what we were able to see at the time. By around 10 o'clock at night, we were helping our friend move, and we ended up accidentally almost driving into what was slowly becoming a riot on Second Avenue. And as we drove onto Second Avenue, we saw something that felt pretty surreal. Trash cans on fire, businesses with glass shattered, bus stops that were completely vandalized. And it really didn't feel like our city. It really didn't feel like the New York we know, because over the years, there's been lots of mass gatherings. There's been lots of reasons for people to protest, but this time it felt different.
And I think the reason why it feels different is because, in some ways, when it comes to this issue of race and equality, America has hit rock bottom. In many ways, people feel like there's no way out. The fact that we see week over week, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen 2 deaths of black men at the mercy of white policemen on television or online makes people feel like nothing is being done. So we understand why these protests are happening, and we think it's a good thing when they're peaceful. Of course, it's unfortunate when it turns violent and there's collateral damage, like businesses and people that are completely innocent. But this is what's happening when people have had enough and when people are angry.
But we also thought it's important to note when progress does happen. Now, think about ourselves individually. Think about any given person or story that you heard about someone that turned their life around, that had so much personal progress and development that you couldn't even recognize the person from before. Unfortunately, oftentimes those stories have a very dark background. There's usually a point in time where that person reaches such a low depth, something that can be considered rock bottom, that they have no place else to go. They have no other options, where they have to reinvent themselves in order to keep on living, in order to have a semblance of chance at a positive life.
Now, let us draw a parallel that at first seems completely unrelated, an event that seems completely unrelated, but you'll see why we think that it's actually very closely related to what's happening right now. Years ago, the NASA space program was falling apart. Our last manned mission was in 2011. Before that, we had several failed launches by NASA where astronauts unfortunately lost their lives. You can say that our space program in America reached rock bottom. But what it forced our space program to do, and what it forced our government to do, is to consider partnering with private organizations. And so the space program and NASA started opening for bids to come from private companies like SpaceX. And now, for the first time in history, we have a collaboration between SpaceX and NASA that has enabled the first manned launch in almost a decade. So from having a program that ceased to exist to going back on the map and having launches into space again and pushing innovation forward.
Today, we woke up pretty early for Sunday to finish that move that we started with our friend. And the city felt very different this morning. Yeah, there was still broken glass on the sidewalks, but you would see people coming together, business owners coming together and helping each other clean up the mess. And as Sergey was walking down the street this morning, he even noticed an artist that was painting over the graffiti that was drawn just 12 hours before. So even within a 12-hour period, people naturally started to come back together. people naturally started to work towards a resolution, the most immediate problem being the trash that needed to be picked up. In the long run, as we start to come out of this situation, people will come together even more. They will come together behind the bigger cause of making sure that the injustices that we've been seeing against Black lives in America never happen again. That is going to take work. That is going to take a sustained effort to change the behavior of the past. But we truly believe that there's a correlation here between the one great thing that happened this weekend, which is humans progressing in science, and the one grave and sad thing that happened this weekend, which is humans having to come together in big groups just to make a point, just to try to bring about change.
We decided to talk about this topic on this 5 minute pick me up because we're hopeful. We believe that even though what's happening now in some ways is necessary, we sincerely hope that because this time things do feel quite different, it also means that the outcomes are going to be different and that we're actually going to see people come together and meaningful change happen.
That's it for the 5 minute pick me up this week. Please stay safe. Please stay together. And of course, we'll see you next week.